Hi, it's Dr. Steve from Misericordia University, and welcome to Animating Graphics and Text Boxes in PowerPoint. This is part of our course, Educational Technology. So let's take a look at animation right from the ground up. Now, chances are you've done some animations in PowerPoint already, but sometimes people miss different parts of the process and then have confusion thereafter. So let's start right from the ground up. You can animate any object on a slide. The first thing you have to do is select the Animations tab, select Animation Pane. Make sure that you show the pane on the right-hand side of the screen, and that way you can see everything that's going to be happening. Then simply click to select any object on the slide, press Animation, and then specify. You can specify as many as you want: an entrance, an entrance and an emphasis, entrance, emphasis, exit, and so on, or skip all of that and say, give me a motion path. And also, you can specify a sound by selecting effects from the drop-down arrow in any playlisted item. This will be the easiest way to add sound. Let's take a look at it. So the first thing that I'm going to do in PowerPoint is go to Animations. Here's the Animations tab. It is possible to add an animation without opening this pane, but again, you won't see anything that's going on. So I open Animation Pane, and I'm going to go click on some object on the slide. Keep in mind, you can select anything, but there are differences between selecting graphics and also text. So we'll take a look at both of them separately. You can see that there are some commonly used animation here. I'm going to go into Add Animation so I have the full range of choices. Here's the entrance, here's the emphasis. If I scroll down, here's exits, and I could do any and all of these, all three of these, or I can say skip that and do motion path. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to do an entrance. I'm going to fly this in. Right now I can make some changes. I'm going to go to this drop down arrow, and notice it says start on a click, and there's effect and timing. So I'm going to go to Effect Options. This will open up all the different possible parameters. So it's a billiard ball coming from the right, so I'm going to say from the right. And I can experiment with the timing with how fast it comes in if I want to as well. So maybe I'll just say fast rather than extremely fast. Okay, if I click on that object again, I can add a second animation, so I'm going to put some spin into it. Okay, well, it's spinning in the wrong direction, so let me go click on this, and let me say Effect Options, and I'm going to spin it now in a different direction. Instead of clockwise, I'll do counterclockwise. You can see there are a lot of parameters you can choose here. And I can also select the timing of it. Now at this point, if I play what's happening here, notice it says play from, I'm going to get an idea of what it looks like. But you'll notice that it's going to play one thing after another. I don't get the full picture until I go down to the bottom of the screen or go up into the slideshow menu and say view it from the current slide. In that case, I'll see this slide blown up to the full screen, and then I'll see what a teacher will actually experience when running this slideshow. So at this point, I've added two things. So let's pause for a moment. Notice it says 1 and 2 mouse clicks to make this happen. If I'm ever confused, because this will populate in a hurry in this animation pane, if I'm ever confused what I'm looking at, click on an object in the pane and look over here on the slide, or conversely, click an object on the slide and go look at the pane. Notice it highlights everything that's affected. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to add one more animation here. So add animation. I did entrance, emphasis. Now let me do exit. I'm going to fly this out. Again, maybe I don't like the way it's going. I want to change some of these parameters. I can do effects, and I can say, just to be dramatic here, maybe I'll go to the top right. And then I can play with the timing as well if I want to. Now at this point, in reality, the teacher has to click 3 times to make a graphic move on the screen. So think about that. When you're teaching, do you want to have to count how many clicks that you do in order to just move a graphic around for illustrative purposes? Maybe it would be better if you said, how about I click 1 time? So let me go to the second one. When I go to the second one, I'm going to go to the drop-down arrow, and where it says timing, instead of click, I'm going to say with or after the previous. In this case, I'm going to say with, because that way the spin and the fly in are going to happen at the same time. Now another way I can get this is if I just take the drop-down arrow, notice even without going into timing, it says start on click with or after the previous. For this third item, when it flies out, I'm going to do that after the previous. Now I'm just going to play it from the beginning. Oh, look at that. The teacher will ultimately click 1 time, and those first 2 things happen at the same time, and the third one happens after 1 and 2 take place. Notice how a couple things. Number one, the teacher only has to do 1 click, and this whole routine plays. Easier for the teacher. Number 2, notice that the whole numbering system has changed. There's 1 mouse click. Second one happens at the same time. Third one is a timing issue. It happens after 1 and 2 have taken place. Now, let's review that quickly and add sound to animation. So I'm going to, first of all, I have the animation pane open. I'm going to click on this graphic. I'm going to add an animation, and I'm going to fly it in. Now, when I fly this in, first of all, I don't like the parameter there, so let me go change it. Let me fly it from the right. Now notice, it's only flying this far. Well, why doesn't it fly across the screen? Well, when you think about it, when I roll over the playlisted item in the animation pane, it says on click, it's an entrance, fly in. So it's flying in from the right. So when I fly it, now I'm flying from the right. When I fly it in, it's only going to fly as far as I place it on the slide. So if I took it up to here, let's say, now it's going to fly all the way across. So notice, fly in from the right means literally fly in. It doesn't tell it where to stop. So place that graphic where you want it to be. Second of all, let's go add a sound. Right? I'll take the drop-down arrow, and then I'll say Effect Options. Notice here are the sounds. When I go to sounds, I can select something from this list. And in class, we're going to take a look at how you can add your own sound. We're going to go search for them and then embed them into the presentation. For now, I'm just going to do this breeze sound. So notice, when the animation plays, the sound plays also. Notice, all I had to do to add sound was go up to the drop-down arrow and say Effect Options, and there's the sounds right here. If you do this, this is the easiest way to add sound. A way not to add sound is going to say Insert an Audio. Now that would seem logical. The only problem is, when is it going to play? See, in this case, when you click on a graphic and you've animated it and you put the sound right in the animation itself, that's going to play at the right time, and it removes a lot of responsibility and extra work from the teacher. Now, instead of selecting entrance, emphasis, and/or exit, I could click on a graphic. I could say Add Animation and skip by these 3 and say Motion Path. If I say Motion Path, and certainly there are certain specifics here, if I say a custom path, that gives me the opportunity to draw my own path. Now, I can do it in one of 2 ways. I can click and keep holding, and notice how I can draw around. And when you're finished, double click Or I'm going to delete this, or I could do another way. So let me just show that one. Custom path, click, and then click again, and click again. Notice the difference. In this case, they're all going to be firm angles. And double click again to finish. Firm angles. So it's going to be very, it's going to kind of jump quickly from one direction to another. When I did the first way by clicking and holding, it's like using a pencil, and you get to draw around the way that you want this graphic to move. Now let me show you two tricks when you're animating graphics. Trick number one is, let me go up to the animation pane, and I'm going to add an animation, and I'm going to do the motion path. Realize that when you're drawing, you can actually draw off the slide. So the slide can really be like a stage. Now I'm coming in from another side. I'm going to go off the stage, come back on, and I can even end the animation. I'll double click here, off the slide. Look at that. So this ostrich kind of goes all around and ends up off the screen. Now, the only problem here, it's not this problem, but you kind of take away some of the excitement from the learner if you don't have this character come from off stage. Because when you look at it, when we start, the graphic is sitting right there in the middle, and the learners are going to expect something's going to happen. Let's add the element of surprise, and I'll show you another trick. I'm going to go up to the animation pane, click delete, and start this again. Instead of animating from here, let me start dragging this graphic off the slide. Now, here's a little trick with that. Sometimes when you get close to the end, it's hard to nudge it off. If I have it selected, I can use the arrow keys to assist me in moving it off. So I'll make sure it's off, and then I'm going to add my animation at this point, and I'm going to do my custom, and I'm going to start bringing it. So all of a sudden, the ostrich makes its move coming onto the slide, like onto the stage, and it's moving around. It's going to do a little loop-de-loop, and then end up over here well off the stage. When I play that, you can see it's going to be a very dramatic entrance and more exciting for the learners. I mentioned earlier that you can animate any object on a slide, which includes text, but I also pointed out that text is different than working with graphics. Let's show you how different it is. When I look at this text, I might be tempted, because of my work in other apps, to highlight the text. Now, by the way, don't do this, but let me show you what happens if you do this. Say I'm going to fly this in. Notice one click and all of these items pop in together. And that's how it's going to look. All of a sudden, it's just, it's all going to be there. Now, that's missing the whole point of animation. So I'm going to go and delete all of this and show you a much better way to do this. And this is the point of animation of text. Because what I want to do is, I want to bring in one bullet first. And after the learners get to digest that with the teacher, then I want to bring in a second bullet, and so on. To do this, I cannot be in the box when I press the animation button. Instead, I have to grab or highlight the box. Do that by clicking on the box itself. And it was subtle, but did you notice in this display that when I clicked into the box, it's a dotted line? When I click on the outside, the outline of the box, it becomes a solid line. So dotted to solid. Now, go ahead and add the animation. I'm going to say fly in. And right now, on my display, it looks like it's all popping in at the same time. But notice, in the animation pane, two things are happening. Number one, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. The teacher has to click 4 times. For graphics, that would not be desirable. But for text, perfect. That allows the teacher to pace what's happening here. A second thing that happens, notice there's this gray expander box. And what this means is, basically, you did this right. Because if I click on this, I can find that all of these bullets have animated as we described. And as long as this is closed, whatever I do with bullet number 1 is done for all bullets. So if I wanted to change, like effect options, if I wanted to add sound here, that would be ideal too. Whatever I do to bullet number 1, it does this to all bullets. Now, when I see how it actually is going to play, again, on this display, it looks like they're coming in one after another immediately. In reality, it pauses and waits for the teacher to click to bring in each and every bullet. For emphasis, I'm going to do this one more time, this time a little quicker. I'll click into the box. To bring up the box, I click on the outline of the box to highlight and grab it. Go up to Add Animation, select one of the entrances. So I'll fly this in. I now have an expander box, and that means that all bullets are coming in one at a time, waiting for the teacher. Perfect. Now, let's add sound. As I did before with graphics, I only have to click on, in this case, the first one and the only playlisted item showing because of that gray expander box. Go down to Effect Options. Pick a sound. Now, here's a thought with sound while we're choosing one, because all I have to do is select one, it's going to work fine. Think about if I choose a long sound, like applause. Look how long it takes for that sound to play out. Remember, you're going to be teaching, and you have to talk during this process. It's ideal to choose a short sound. So let me go change this. I'll go once again into the drop-down arrow, Effect Options. Instead of applause, let me choose something short, something like camera, or cash register, or breeze, something that takes maybe 1 second to play. Now that is much more effective. Don't forget the reason why we're doing animation and adding sound. We're doing animation with text to pace the text that's coming onto the screen so we don't overload the learner and confuse them. And number 2, we add sound so that it indicates and cues to the learner that something is happening on the screen and take a better look at what's going on. So make sure that you choose a sound that is short. Let me show you an advanced trick and technique in PowerPoint that can help certain students in your classroom, especially those who would have certain cognitive situations that would cause them to have difficulty focusing on the appropriate content that you're talking about at that time. So let's take a look. I already highlighted these bullets and I already animated them. Let me go to the drop-down arrow, Effect Options. Notice there's a special item available under the Sound and Effect Options called After Animation. And here it's specifying don't dim. In other words, don't do anything by default. But I can have it dim and gray out the text if I want to. Now that's interesting. Notice what happens. Now it's happening quickly here. When I bring up to the full screen, it's going to pause after every single bullet. After bullet number 1 comes in, then bullet number 2 comes in, and bullet number 1 turns gray. So it kind of fades out into the background a little bit more. And it's happening fast on this quick preview version. When I take it up to the full screen, you'll see the benefit of this, because the one bullet that's not going to be referred to anymore won't go off the screen, but rather it will just fade out a little bit into the background. A hint that's good to know: if you're like me and I'm getting excited looking at all of these different objects on the slide to be animated, I'll just go ahead and start animating them. The problem is, when I play them, they may not be in any kind of order at all. I could change up this order if I wanted to. Now, before I do that, let me click on the beach ball to start. When I do that, notice it's going to highlight in the animation pane, this playlist, which items are going to be affected. At this point, I can do one of two things. This picture 9, and by the way, picture 9, realize that the graphics are numbered in the latest versions of PowerPoint. So the order in which I put them in, this is the 9th graphic I inserted here. Take picture 9 and put the two picture 9s together. I can either click and drag up, or let me click on another one. I could take one and simply click this arrow. If you're in the mobile world, it's easier sometimes to use the arrows. And I click on the last one. Okay, now it looks like there's a much better order going on here. And sure enough, it is. On this slide, let me just review quickly. I'm going to highlight the bullets, and I'm going to bring them in. And I can also do, when I'm working with graphics, I could also do a custom path if I wanted to. So I could have this butterfly move around to make it a little more interesting. And sometimes people wonder, is it acceptable to have a title animated? You can. It's not something you necessarily have to do, but if you're going to do it, make sure that it is the first item that's going to be in the process here. When I look at the order right now, the title comes a little bit later. Well, isn't the title of the slide meant to help the learner determine what's going on this slide? So if that's going to be the case that you're going to animate this, move it up to the top. So I'll put it right on the top. Let me grab it, push it up a little bit. It'll be the first thing in, and that would be a much better thing to do. And when you're considering doing animations, think about, like we said with sounds, make animations be short enough. You want them to be eye-catching. You want them to draw the attention of the learner. But at the same time, you do not want to draw the attention of the learner away from and distract them from the content that you're attempting to show them. Now, let's look at a couple of advanced aspects of working with animation. Let's say here I have 2 boxes of bullets. Let's say that I wanted to bring in advantage 1 and then fly in advantage 2. Okay, well that's a challenge because normally all of the bullets in this one box will fly in one after another. Oh, and one other thing we would like to do here. These are kind of like titles right here, section titles. Let's not animate the word advantages or disadvantages. Any ideas about how to do that? Here's something you could do to be very efficient with it. Click on the box of the advantage bullets. Let's go animate them. I'm going to fly them in. And I'm going to fly them in from the left. So effect options. Let me fly them from the left. And if I wanted to, I could put a happy sound here because they're advantages, they're positives. So I won't do applause because that's going to be a very loud, a very long sound. So let me do cash register. I'll say that's a happy sound. Now, if I open the expander box, I see the word advantages is up here. Why don't I click on that one and hit the delete key? This way, I started by animating all of these in this box, and then I deleted the first one. Let me do the same thing over here with the second box. I'm going to fly them in. I'm going to fly them in from the opposite direction now on purpose. So let me fly them in from the right. Let me pick a sad sound, so to speak. I'm going to choose the bomb as a sad sound. And as I did before, I'm going to open the expander box. I find the word disadvantages, this kind of title. I'm going to hit the delete key. And now when we would play these animations. Okay, now I see that I have one after another, which is positive, but why don't I rearrange them so the advantage one is followed by disadvantage one? No problem. Let me open up both of those expander boxes. Click on this one and move it up the list. And again, I could also move it up the list by using the little arrow buttons. Now it should work just the way I desired it. By having a better command of PowerPoint animation, you can really control how you want these items to come into the screen. Now I'm going to bring this up to the full screen and let me demo something which is an advanced use of animation to illustrate a point to students. And then let's go ahead and code this and make it happen. So notice we're saying the ingredients we need on the left. I have an empty beaker on the right. Oh, look at that. We added 1 cup of water so the text came in, and then the beaker now fills up with water. And it pauses and waits for the teacher. And then you'll notice we illustrate by bringing in the text, add salt, and then we also have the salt shaker appearing here too. Let's see how we can code that to make it happen. So let's code this and make it happen. First, I've got a box of 2 bullets. So I'm going to go animate those first. I'm going to fade them in. I'm going to open the expander box because I know that in a moment or two from now I'm going to have to separate these and not have them next to each other. To begin with, I'm going to have this empty beaker here. When the first bullet flies in, number 1 up here in the playlist, I want the beaker to fill with water. Now, the magic behind the scenes is I'm going to get the same graphic, or similar graphic, should I say, but this time where it looks like it has water in it. Let me make that appear. So the beaker with water, I'm going to fade that in, and just so the learners can see it, I'm going to slow down the timing a little. It'll be a little more understandable in that case, and a little more dramatic. I'm going to move this animation up. So right now, I have perfect order. This text comes in, the first text, it seems like the beaker fills with water, and now the second text bullet appears, add the salt. So the next thing is I'm going to take the salt and make that appear after the second bullet appears. So let me click on the salt, I've placed it, let me go animate it. When I animate it, I'm going to have that fade in. So timing, I'm going to go in and make it a little slower to be a little more dramatic. And now I have to just decide which items should I click to bring in, because right now it's requiring 4 clicks from the teacher. Well, the first item brings in the first bullet, second item fulfills it down here. It says add a cup of water, the water is there. So for item number 2, I'm going to say do it either with or after the previous. And the same thing for the second one. The bullet will pop in, it won't come in until teacher clicks, but then it'll fly in, or fade in this case, and then it's going to happen down here. So the salt shaker then should be, in terms of when it comes in, should be with or after the previous. And when you play it, you can determine, is it better to bring in the bullet and pause and then have this item happen, or is it better to bring them both in at the same time? Then when I play them, I find that everything works the way I desire it to. That's a great use of graphics to help illustrate what we're teaching. Now let's take a look at tweaking the timing of the animations in this playlist in the animation pane. So if I wanted to, I now have 3 different animations going on here with these 2 graphics. I'm going to click play. You can see they're a little disjunct in terms of everything that's happening. So if I wanted to, I can go in and I can say, show me the more advanced timeline. So if I go into any playlisted item, it will either say show or hide advanced timeline. So I'm going to click show to make sure I'm seeing this version right here. Now you notice that we have bars of representing timing for each of these playlisted items when they're actually going to play. So if I were to take these and move them around, I can move this around, but notice it's not letting me go back any further to the left. Well, the way I can fix that is by setting these items after the first one to with the previous. So if I say start with, now they're all at the same starting time. And what that will let me do, so with the previous, now I can take each one of these and I can tweak it just a little bit more. Just to try it, I'm going to just move this up a little bit and let's see how it works. Okay, now I can see that it's still a little bit out. So I'm going to try it. I'll move this back a little bit more. And again, if I need to, I can tweak it and I can make things work just the way that I want them. Now, it'd be better if I can click on the first one here because I'm playing from the first one. Okay, now notice that that ball is moving a little too early. So let me click on this one. Let me move it out a little bit. Let's play from the first one. Okay, that's looking better. And maybe this one, once it starts moving, I can start at about the same time. So let's try that, see if I tweaked it pretty well. Yes, not bad. A great way to use animations is with an element called a callout. In PowerPoint, we can use callouts to point attention, to call attention to something. If I go to the Insert menu item, and if I go to Shapes, I'll find all kinds of callouts. Now, you'll notice that there's an area called callouts, and that will be this traditional type of a bubble for someone to speak or to think. And then we can use the little handle on the bottom to point to different things. But in addition to the callouts area, if I go into Insert Shapes, really I can use any of the items that are here to function like a callout. For example, the block arrows. I can take an arrow, drag it out, and I can resize it. Notice all of these little extra handles. That will allow you to reshape this in any way that you like. So choose your shape, click on it, and then you could type something here. And it's just text, so I can always go up to the Home tab and I can change the color of the text. Also, if I click on the object, notice Shape Format appears in the menu item in the ribbon. And I can go to the Shape Fill and I can change the colors that are in here. Remembering UDL, I want to make sure that the text is readable over the color. And I can change the shape outline if I want to as well. And in addition to the outline, I can go into the outline and say the color of the outline and say the weight of the color that's outlining this shape. And then to make it more visible to the students, I can go to Animations, add an animation, and then bring this in. And if I bring this in effect options with a sound, that's going to be very obvious to the student that something has happened here, and you're telling them a bit of information that's going to be important. Like in this case, remember this, and you'll be helping to prioritize the student's understanding of this content. Now, I can also fly it in different ways. So maybe I'll bring it in from the left so it flies right in. And we've been talking about not distracting the learner. Maybe when one of these comes in, let me go and do another one. I'll say insert shapes, and this time maybe I'm going to call attention to something larger, so I can draw this larger shape, and again there's all extra handles there, and I would have this point to something in particular, something larger on the screen, and I could type some text on here. When I click on this and I animate, maybe what I would like to do is do something a little more exciting. For example, I can, instead of just fade it in or make it just appear, maybe I'll swivel it in or bounce it in. Look how visible that is to the learners. And again, I can add sounds very easily and make that very understandable to the learners. Here's a good example of how to use callouts in a very constructive way. If we're pointing to locations on a map, if I wanted to point to Alaska, I'll go to Insert Shapes, and I'm going to take one of these block arrows. This way I can type right onto it. And again, I can change the color of the text and the object and so on. This is a large area I'm pointing to, so I'm selecting a large arrow. Let's say I wanted to pinpoint where Dallas, Pennsylvania is, where Misericordia is located. Let me say Insert Shapes. This time, let me go to the actual callouts area. I'm going to take one of these callouts that has the ability to point very specifically to a pinpoint location. And then I can type that information right on this object. Now notice if you reshape or resize the object, it's going to change where you're pointing. So don't forget to go back in and double check that and make sure that it's pointing accurately to the place that you want it to. Finally, our last technique, let's use drawing tools as callouts, and let's animate those. Let's say you're teaching something in language arts and you want to highlight a word like this verb, walked. What I could do is, instead of just talking about it in class or writing it on a whiteboard, I could say Insert Shapes. I can select one of the shapes like a rectangle, and I'll drag this out. Now at this point it's going to hide the word, but don't worry because we're going to fix that in a moment. I'm not going to type something on this, but rather I'm going to just use it as a highlight. So let me go and animate it. I'm going to fade this in. I'm going to fade it in just a little more slowly so the students can see it coming. That's a timing issue. Instead of very fast, let me bring it in at the medium. And let me also go into Effect and let me select a sound. So I'm going to go and pick the chime. So that will call attention to the change happening on the slide. Now all I have to do is click on this and let's get it behind this other object. So if I right click on this, I can send it to the back. Notice that I animated it first because otherwise the object will be hiding behind this text box containing the sentence, and then I'm not going to be able to touch it. So at this point, when we run this, when the teacher talks about this and asks a question of the students, the teacher can then click on this and highlight. Now, one other thing that I could do to make it even better and even more illustrative is, let me go to Insert Shapes. Let me drag out one of these block arrows. I'm going to drag this out. I'm going to use the same color coding because maybe I'll do several of these at the same time in the sentence. I'm only using one at this moment, and I can type something here like the word walked is the verb of this sentence. And maybe I will shrink this down a little bit so it's not overpowering on the screen. And again, it's an object. I can highlight it. I can go in and change the color of the font or any aspect of the object. Now that I'm here, let me animate this item also. Animations. I'm going to add an animation. I'm going to fade this in. I'm going to fade this one in a little bit more slowly, so that's a timing issue. Move that down to medium. And then I'm going to already have a sound coming in, so I won't need to add a sound to this one. But what I'd like to do is, instead of clicking and clicking, I would like to have this start after the previous. So what I'd like to do here is, notice one click up here, the other one is timed after the previous. When the teacher pauses, asks the students about this example, then the teacher clicks, this text box will highlight this word, and after that, this call out will come in to reinforce what the teacher has said. So this is what it will look like. Now that can be very clear and illustrative to the students. Great use of drawing tools, which are callouts in this case, and animation and sounds for educational purposes. To review, we started this video by pointing out that a teacher could animate any object on a slide, either text or graphics, but there's a difference between the process of animating one versus the other. Then, after we selected objects, we specified entrance, emphasis, and or exit, and sometimes we did custom path. We even dragged some objects off the slide in order to make them a little more dramatic. Then we added sounds by selecting effects from the playlisted items drop-down menu. And finally, we did some advanced animations, and we created callouts and added sound to them to point and call attention to specific items on a slide. I hope you enjoyed this video and look forward to seeing you in class.